run right to the end. People come on, you don't need to be scared. Cause you're gonna love again.
Hi, you're watching the Haider Rifaat Show Season 10, and I'm your host, Haider Rifaat. Today, my guest is Dr. Christine Fair. She's an American political scientist, professor at Georgetown University, and an author. Welcome back to the show, Christine.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. So, before moving on to the heart of the interview, you have served in the academia for numerous years and have also built strong expertise in politics, particularly in relation to South Asia. So, looking back, are you proud of the legacy that you have built over time? And what has been the most rewarding and the most challenging part about building that legacy?
So I am only 57. I don't think about having a legacy. Sorry. I'm just still doing my thing. So I don't think about things like that. Um, yeah, so I don't know how to answer that question. I don't think about things like that.
But you're very well regarded in the political realm, especially when it comes to political commentary on South Asia. So how does it make you feel when you're regarded as, an expert in that particular area and you've built this kind of like career over this? So I'm sure you
I
must think
mean,
about it, right? Or no?
no, I actually don't. I just wake up every day just trying to put one foot forward like everyone else. I mean, I've been really fortunate to have this career. It's not the career that I thought I was going to have. Because, first of all, I'm not a political scientist. I did my PhD in South Asian languages and civilizations. So, this is not the career that I thought I was going to have when I started my PhD. But I've been very fortunate to have this career for sure.
Hmm. Right. And what really drew you to studying South Asia in particular? Because I know you have a master's and a PhD from University of Chicago. So what really prompted an interest in South Asia particularly?
So that's more a kahani than it is a jawab. I mean, to be blunt. I set out to be a biophysical chemist. That's what I wanted to be from the time I was very young, and I started my PhD in biophysical chemistry. Um, but my mother became ill, and she passed away, and I didn't feel like she died of cancer. So for me, I couldn't continue working in the sciences for a variety of reasons. But along the way, I worked in a lot of labs. And most of the people I worked with were from South Asia. They were from Afghanistan. They were largely from not from Afghanistan, from Pakistan and from India, maybe the occasional Bangladeshi. So when I graduated from college, at their encouragement, I actually traveled to South Asia right after I graduated. And I just became very interested in it.
So Christine, I wanted to move on and talk a little bit about Islamophobic violence in the United States. Oftentimes, the word terrorism is associated with the Muslim world. You have been very vocal about it, especially linking terrorism with Pakistan. You have done some work on it. But I find it pretty hypocritical that the West would conveniently call out Muslim countries for terrorism while their own countries are grappling with domestic terrorism, mainly Islamophobic terrorism, because the recent San Diego mosque shooting, as you know, is a
Mm.
perfect example of terrorism done against Muslims on American soil. And these were people who were harboring these hateful sentiments towards certain racial groups. And there were simply Muslims who were practicing their faith. And similarly, I would also like to point out the hypocrisy of Indian media because under the Modi government back in 2024, hate speech surged by 74%, according to a Washington-based research group, and Muslims were the prime targets. And I will quote BBC directly from here. The report said most of the events were hate speech. Most of the events of the hate speech occurred were held in states governed by Modi's party or the larger alliance. So he has been peddling this kind of anti-Muslim hatred with his base. So considering these statistics, do you acknowledge this hypocrisy?
So I don't think so. We have to you put a bunch of things together that don't necessarily go together. I understand why you put it together, but I don't approach things that way. So in the United States, the number one victim of domestic terrorism are Jews, not Muslims. The second most targeted group is Muslims. So I wanted to make a factual correction. But it is by an order of 10, actually, that Jews are more targeted than Muslims. This is, I don't necessarily think of this as hypocrisy is a different kind of concept for this. These are hate crimes, right? So you can have both things can be true, that terrorism can exist in Muslim countries and hate crimes, which to my mind are actually a form of terrorism. So I don't make a huge distinction between terrorism and hate crimes. These crimes are meant to terrorize the Muslim community. Take someone like Ilham Omar, right, who is a very outspoken member of the US Congress. Look at the kind of vitriol that she receives from Randy Fine, who is a Jewish senator.
Correct.
Um, if you were to imagine a senator making similar comments that were anti-Semitic, they would be out. They would be out. But this kind of hate speech is completely legitimate against Muslim legislators. So I totally share your sentiment of outrage about these attacks on Muslims in the United States. Ever since 9/11, now I'm old enough to have a life before 9/11. I remember when the Oklahoma City bombing happened, that the immediate response to that bombing was to blame Muslims, right? So there's been Islamophobia in this country for as long as I've been a sentient adult. So I don't think anyone who works in the terrorism space as I do can fail to acknowledge the terrorism that Muslims, but also Jews, are experiencing in this country. The United States, and then we'll turn to India here briefly. The United States is in the grips of Christian nationalism. Right? This is the sentiment that's emerging. It's anti-Muslim, it's anti-Jew, it's anti-woman, it's anti-Black and brown, it's anti-LGBTQI. So Muslims are not the only victims by any means of this Christian
Yes.
nationalism.
I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interject here. I completely agree with
yeah.
you. And I think the factual error that you pointed out, actually, I was not alluding to Jews. I was specifically talking about Islamophobic violence.
No, I was pointing
Particularly.
out that
Mhm.
That Islamic phobic violence is not the most common. It's the second most common. And
That's correct. I acknowledge
and
that,
it's
but
yeah,
I think the parallel that I
and it's
was drawing was with Islamophobic violence and how it's and whether do you acknowledge that Muslims are also victims of domestic terrorism in the
Well,
US?
I've already said that. I mean, I said that
Yeah.
repeatedly in my answer to you, that not
Yeah.
only do I acknowledge it, I mean, I decry this in my social media. I haven't been on Twitter for a very long time because Twitter has become such a
Yeah.
caustic place. But if you were my Facebook friend, you would see that I decry this all the time. And I decry Islamophobic violence where it occurs in the United Kingdom as well as where it occurs in Europe. And also where it occurs in India. What I think is interesting, comparing the United States to India, is that whereas the United States is in the throes of Christian nationalism, India is in the throes of Hindu nationalism. And what we've seen, for example, Gau Rakshaks, which have the implicit imprimatur of the government, are killing Muslims on the excuse of eating beef, having beef, being involved with the traffic of cattle, when in fact, in many cases, it's just an excuse to kill Muslims.
The role of Pakistan in attempting to mediate peace between Iran and the US. So how would you assess the role of Pakistan so far?
So it's hard. So it's really hard to know because we haven't had a durable peace come out of the process.
Correct.
I think what is really interesting in the last year and a half is that Pakistan has been able to rehabilitate its relationships with the United States, and by saying that Pakistan was grateful to the United States, to Trump in particular, for diffusing the crisis, saving countless lives, preventing nuclear war, and ultimately nominating him for the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize. India, in contrast, continued to say that Trump was not involved in the peace process, much to the irritation of Trump. And so I think the Operation Sindoor provided, I think, the ultimate opportunity for Pakistan to revivify ties with the United States under President Trump. To be
That's,
honest with you, I think India would have loved to have played this role that Pakistan is playing.
do you think
Um,
so?
I think it would have loved to, and I'll tell you why I think so. Because after all, India has been developing very important relations with Israel as well, and not with Israel as well as with Iran, as well as with the United States. But it's because India has fallen so far out of disfavor with the Trump administration that the Sawal Padani Honda, that it would be the intermediary. So I think India would have loved to have played that role, but it was not a role that was opportune for it.
And you also mentioned in an interview, quote, if we, as in the United States, had a sane president instead of an egotistical maniac, alluding to Donald Trump, I don't think Pakistan would be where it is. So hypothetically, where would Pakistan be if Trump was not the current US president?
So I think it would probably be where it was under Biden,
Mm,
right? Because the overall strategic goals of the U.S. and Pakistan are not in alignment,
correct.
right? And so if you don't have strategic interests that are in alignment, then good relations don't typically follow suit. And so I think had we not had, and look, let's look at what Trump did, Trump 1.0, what he did to Pakistan. You remember he cut off all assistance to Pakistan,
Hmm.
right? People forget what Trump 1.0 did to Pakistan. He was the first president in American history to cut off aid just like that without going through a congressional process of sanctioning. He just woke up one day and said, Pakistan, we're done with you.
Yeah.
Um, so the vicissitudes of President Trump on the U.S.-Pakistan relationship, I think is really important.